Look, the big news this week is Justin Trudeau's announcement that he's resigning. A decade ago, the PM's rise was closely connected to how he used social media to construct an image. The mood on that image has flipped. Today on the show, what Trudeau's relationship with pop culture tells us about the moment. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Okay, look, we've had a couple of days, I guess, to digest Justin Trudeau's decision to resign as Prime Minister. Obviously, this is a political story, and no, we are not a show about politics. But it is also a cultural story, and that's the conversation that I want to have this morning. I think it's fair to say that Justin Trudeau was the first maybe real influencer prime minister, a politician whose political fortunes were kind of tied to his celebrity and his pop culture currency. That the things that some people loved about him ended up being kind of exactly the things that swished others off about him. We're talking about like the big smile, the endless reels on Instagram, you know, the him just being sunny and positive in general. And I think it's safe to say we've come to a place where that is pretty out of step with the mood or the general vibe of large swaths of this country right now. So to trace the arc of Justin Trudeau's time as our influencer prime minister, Justin Ling is here, Riley Yesno is here, Jen Gerson is here. Good morning to all of you.
Good morning.
Hello.
Morning.
Listen, Justin, I'm going to start with you, pal. I want to start by maybe even interrogating the premise a little bit, like this idea that Trudeau was the first influencer prime minister. Am I off the mark here? What evidence do we have of this idea?
Yeah, you're totally wrong.
Go off.
100% wrong. The entire premise
Great.
is incorrect.
Thrilled.
The first influencer prime minister in Canadian history is not Justin Trudeau.
Okay.
It was Pierre Elliott Trudeau. I
Okay.
mean, let's be real. You want to talk about a celebrity prime minister who traded in their cultural cachet and who married their political project to being a kind of quasi-celebrity. It was our current prime minister's father. I mean, you know, it was an era of Studio 54. It was an era of kind of hobnobbing with, you know, the cultural elites, even in New York City, right? I mean, Pierre Elliott Trudeau launched Trudeau Mania 1.0, and I think it's hard to say that anybody is ever going to really surpass that in Canadian history because we have lost that sort of monoculture of the 1970s.
Right.
But it is fair to say that Justin Trudeau is the first social media influencer prime minister.
That's what I meant. That's what I didn't mean the first celebrity prime minister, but it's more
title.
Yes, I know, but what I'm trying to say, like, he embodied a certain ethos of social media. And by that, I mean, like, when you were working at Vice and I was working at BuzzFeed, he had a particular knack for creating social media conversations, these really memeable moments, right? Like the idea of, like, he would come out and he would say, yes, my cabinet is 50% women, and then he would be asked, well, why is that? And the answer is because it's 2015. And that becomes this meme and this sort of internet shareable moment. But he was conversant to me in the internet social media in a way that very few other politicians in this country have been, even since then. And I don't know if that feels true to you. Is that, like, the idea that he started off being in that place?
Yeah, and let's be real. There's probably nobody else in the world who quite kind of hit the zeitgeist like he did, and it was a pretty short-lived zeitgeist. You know, the amount of time the general public kind of wanted this super Twitter literate, really memeable, uber online, viral moment kind of prime minister. The number of people around the world who want that today, I think, is shrinking violently. But he very much was of that moment, 2015, 2017. 2018. And I don't think anyone else really captured that. I mean, Barack Obama, I think, kind of did that, but with an air of presidentiality to it. It's not a word. That's okay.
You invented it. I like it.
The prime minister, you know, Trudeau, managed to hit that moment kind of right on the nose. And I think we're going to look back at it as a deeply weird and strange and sort of like liminal space time that I don't think we'll ever really want to go back to.
Okay, I want to come back to that in just a moment. But Jen, I want to play you something that Trudeau's former chief of staff, Jerry Butt, said to Matt Galloway on the Current yesterday.
You know, there's a reason we're all still reading Shakespeare, or at least interested in Shakespeare. These narrative arcs are eternal, and with tragic heroes, the things that serve them incredibly well on the way up often serve them incredibly poorly on the way down. And in Mr. Trudeau's case, I think that's his admirable stubbornness and self-confidence.
stubbornness and self-confidence. Look, in addition to those qualities, I think we can also add he had a gift for, connecting with people, both I think in person and on social media for a period of time. He had that Vogue spread, in 2017, Rolling Stone asked, is he the free world's best hope? He became like the shirtless meme. He had all these like his face printed on t-shirts and stuff like that. To what extent was that facet, do you think, of his early success also the thing that led to his downfall now?
Yeah, so politicians are not so dissimilar from the rest of us. They're a little dissimilar. But I think all of them, you become bound and blinded by both your success and your failures, right? If you do something that works well for you at a very particular moment in time, you'll have a tendency to double down on it again and again and again. And politicians, I think, are particularly vulnerable to that problem because when they actually are elevated to positions of power, they kind of get trapped in information bubbles and loyalty bubbles. So people who are telling them the things that they want to hear quite a lot, and people who are reflecting the values that they surround themselves with. And when you have power, you often aren't forced to confront people outside of the sphere that makes you comfortable. So I think what happens to a lot of politicians is that they come to power on a particular message, a tone, a theme, a set of techniques or approaches, and then they get kind of trapped in amber in that theme, even as the world radically changes around them. I mean, to draw an analogy here, I think the Conservatives are running into the same trap. They're still going, carbon tax election, axe the tax, carbon tax election, axe the tax, because it's worked for them. It's been very effective for them. It's put them to 20 points ahead in the polls. It's going to be really hard for them to pivot from that when the world pivots around them. Trudeau has had a similar version of that with his tone, his personality, his speeches, the fashions he's adopted, the people he's put around them. Suddenly, in hindsight, we look back at a lot of that stuff and it feels very cringe. It feels very MySpace. Right? I mean, the world changed very dramatically. He came to power in 2015. The world changed dramatically for the first time in 2016. And I think that he's been sort of struggling to find the zeitgeist ever since.
I want to hold on that thought because I think it's an important one. Maybe I'll put this to you, Riley. This idea that Trudeau was kind of frozen in ember because of his approach, and he did not really adjust that approach as the world kind of changed around him. Because his time as this influencer prime minister, started out with these like sort of like unanimous likes and hearts, but then by the time like last May rolled around, we got posts like this one. Listen to this.
Hey, Hayden, how you doing?
Prime Minister, happy May the 4th.
And to you too, my friend. I've actually told the kids they better be binging Star Wars.
Amazing.
Look, I'm cringing as I play you that audio. I'm not going to lie to you. So this is a cringy video of Justin Trudeau taking a call from Hayden Christensen, the Canadian actor who's, of course, in Star Wars. Riley, you're in your 20s, the target demo for this kind of content in theory, but not in practice. When did the shine wear off for that kind of approach to presenting yourself as a politician?
Yeah, I mean, I think to piggyback off of what everyone's saying, it faded pretty quick. To show my youth for a moment here is that when Justin Trudeau was elected in 2015, I was 16 years old. And so not only has the world changed, certainly since then, but the internet has changed. I'm remembering the internet being 16 in 2015. That was like, there was no TikTok. That was when, everyone was using those sepia filters on Instagram. Pepe memes were at their height. It was a different time to be an internet person also. And I think that these days, the currency on the online world is authenticity. And I don't mean unplanned or non-strategic, but I don't believe that he told his kids that they better be binging Star Wars. I believe he told Hayden Christensen that for this video. By contrast, I do believe that Pierre Poilievre would say the things he says to Jordan Peterson on his podcast, right? And so those are the things that I think Justin Trudeau has failed to realize for a very long time, that people can tell that just like, for example, also another victim of this inauthentic sort of online presence is Jagmeet Singh. No, I don't believe that you, go around skateboarding doing these things. I believe your Gen Z intern told you to do that so that you could post a reel. And so there is clearly this consciousness that, yes, the internet is this powerful tool. It's important for politicians to be on there and that it can be done well. But there are so many of them that are missing the mark. And Justin Trudeau, I think, just happens to be, especially in this moment, like the very emblematic victim of that trend.
Justin, if I can sort of like zoom out, 30,000 feet for a moment, the thing that makes this conversation the purview of this show is that we deal in pop culture, and pop culture is largely constructed through image construction. And that's not that different from the realm of politics. That's what makes this conversation something that we want to have on the show. And look, about 6 months ago, about 6 months before the Star Wars tweet came out, Trudeau's team hired a new communications director, Max Valiquette. He's a childhood friend of Trudeau's. He's sort of known as like an advertising guru who specializes in youth marketing. Yesterday, Max posted this photo that really captures this moment that we're in. Max is sort of slumped in this chair. He's got this like faraway stare in his eyes. Trudeau looks downward, kind of dejected. You saw that photo. What does that photo tell you in terms of the plan for image construction versus maybe the reality of it?
Yeah. This photo tells me that even in resignation, they're still neatly manicuring what image they want to put out to the world. I mean, this is like going through a breakup and then putting like a beach photo on your Instagram. This is a little bit of like, or like, a celebrity dies, so you post a photo of yourself like singing Imagine or something, right? Like it's all just like very unreal and put on. And I think it strikes to the heart of just how wildly this government went off the rails, right? You go back 6 months ago when Valiquette was hired, and it was very clear that people were frustrated with this government, but not unreasonably. It was very clear that things are not working in this country, that people both rationally and irrationally have become just sort of alienated from our system of government or shared conversations and all this other stuff, right? Polarization has become a daily fact of life for everybody, not least of which youth. And the government's response was not to own up to any of that, not to accept blame, not to pivot, not to figure out a kind of strategic change, not to start real conversations about how to fix these things. It was to hire a new marketing director, right? It really set the tone of, we're not to blame. You are for being angry at us. So we just need to convince you that you actually love us still. We just need to get in your face and show you we're still the same old Trudeau government we've always been. We'll go on Stephen Colbert, and we'll get back to posting on Instagram, frequently, and we'll get back to being that fun-loving international liberal elite that you elected. And of course, people hated that. People hate being condescended to. I mean, Riley is totally right that authenticity is the currency today. And there's nothing more inauthentic than, just chill out, sit back. We're gonna explain it all to Stephen Colbert, and then you'll understand how you secretly miss us. Like that is just so insulting.
If I can just put this. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to say that there was nothing that summed up all of the strengths and flaws of the liberal communications strategy, and the fact that he was put on Colbert, someone who hasn't actually been super relevant in the pop cultural space for a decade.
Wow.
And it's
he hosts
still
a late night show, Jen.
I'm
Stephen
sorry
Colbert is catching bullets here for
no reason.
I'm sorry to point this out to the fellow 40-year-olds on the panel, but like our time has
still
passed.
in my 30s.
I'm 37. Leave me out of this.
Okay, there you go. Like our time has passed here. No, I mean the thing that I just think is correct about all this, and also thank you, Riley, for pointing out that I don't have this wrong despite being an old woman now. Like, no, that there's a very the kids are doing this right vibe about all this. But for all of Justin Trudeau's definite and undeniable skills with things like charisma and empathy, and I think he absolutely does have those skills in spade. He would need those skills to be a successful politician, and he is a successful politician. If there's one thing that I think that Trudeau has always fundamentally lacked, it's that indefinable and ephemeral quality of authenticity. Everything about his branding, his approach, and his politics are derivative and managed, right? I mean, I don't know if you want to necessarily get into the kind of the pop cultural politics of all this, but if you go back and you even look at Justin Trudeau's sort of stated values and branding approach in terms of his political values prior to his becoming prime minister, you're dealing with someone who was an absolute run-of-the-mill centrist, classic liberal type individual who was definitely of the establishment milieu of his time. Comes to power. 2006, 2017, what we see is a rise in what I would call progressive identitarian politics. And he just adopts them like a new cut of soup. Right? And,
you mean to say like it's not authentic to him that those are his set of politics? It was sort of like a marriage of convenience.
I mean, of course it wasn't. I mean, you know what? No, I will take that back. I don't know what was in his heart. What was in his heart? I can't say. I can only speak as, the jerk from the outside here. But if you compare the politics and the types of values and the language that he was using sort of prior to, say, 2014, and you compare that to post 2016, you can see that he's adopted the aesthetic, the language, and the political trends of that particular moment. And the problem that he's run into is that the trend for what I would call, again, progressive identitarian politics has run itself through. Mm-hmm. It is radically becoming an unpopular set, last year's fashion. This version's MySpace. Like, people are divesting themselves of that particular ideological aesthetic with an extraordinary rapidity. And he can't pivot to, angry anti-institutional populist after 10 years in power, right? Like, that's not a viable pivot, although he's kind of tried with some policy changes. So
I think the point you're raising is that he's so invested in that set of politics that as it has lost political currency, so has Trudeau, and it's a little bit hard to sort of pivot to the other end of the spectrum here. Like, that's sort of the point you're trying to make.
He's invested in the aesthetic of those politics.
Mm-hmm. As opposed to, like, actually embodying those politics. Well, I guess we don't necessarily know his proximity to those politics.
What's changed? What revolution has successfully run through?
Okay, Justin, real quick, and then I got to move on to the next.
Yeah, I mean, just really briefly, I've known the guy a little bit since even before he was prime minister. I've been going back and reading a bunch of the interviews he was giving before he even ran for a seat in the House of Commons. And I mean, here's a guy who in 2003 stood up and said, I want to change the world, and therefore I have to go into politics. I think he's always been this guy. And I think the trappings of how he does it are very dated. They're very stale. They're very circa 2016. But I do think that at his heart, he is that sort of progressive liberal reformer. And I think to some degree, his own stubbornness, as Jerry Butts put it, is what has made it impossible for him to rebrand, change, let in new people, reform himself, heal himself, and keep governing. I mean, that is fundamentally a personality flaw that was once an asset that has kind of trapped him in this hall of mirrors.
Let me just pause here and say, my name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Justin Ling is here from Montreal. Riley Yesno is in Toronto. Jen Gerson in Calgary. We're taking stock of the end of Justin Trudeau's era as our first influencer prime minister, and also looking ahead to what's next. Riley and Jen, I want to talk about, the morning of Trudeau's announcement, Pierre Poilievre releases his video, complete with like this kind of like ominous soundtrack. Instead of speaking with the media and other political leaders, as other political leaders did, here he is talking about liberal politicians.
They want to protect their pensions and paycheck by sweeping their hated leader under the rug months before an election to trick you and then do it all over again.
So that's Poilievre circumventing traditional media, as Jen would say. He would never go on Colbert's show, sounds like. Going directly to people with videos on YouTube and other different social media platforms. Riley, what does Pierre Poilievre get right about this moment, in terms of how to reach people that Trudeau just couldn't?
Yeah, I mean, I think at this moment, for sure, the Conservatives are winning the media game for, yes, again, that authenticity piece that I think Justin Trudeau lacks. You may not agree with it, but I believe Pierre Poilievre would do those things, whether or not he was, the current leader of that party. Mm-hmm. And I think I think his campaign and his communications people have recognized how well also this like combative adversarial communication strategy has worked for other politicians, especially in the US. I think that is something that's definitely leached into this. The Kamala Trump back and forth online sort of fight really did resonate, and it stayed in the headlines and stayed in people's minds. And I think that's what this kind of is. And so when I am also nervous about that. So as much as I would never tell anybody, and I don't think it would be reasonable to tell a politician these days to just log off, get off the internet and just focus on policy, I don't think that's the world we live in. But at the same time, I also think that if you're the internet is best used in its most ideal form as this way to have to reach broader audiences, to connect people, that town square thing that people love to talk about, whether or not it's ever actually been there. And so I think think that at the same time, we need to be really wary about putting all of our eggs in that basket if I was a politician, where people still need to be able to have reasonable back and forth and dialogue. And I know a lot of people at the same time that they were like, oh man, reshare this hardcore video Pierre Poilievre retweeted. They also said, you know, I wish you would actually have a conversation with him like all the other leaders did. And I think that there's only a line that can go so far. And I'm thinking of Nikki Glaser at the Golden Globes the other night, right? Where she said to the room full of all these celebrities, most followed people on the internet, got really popular podcasts. And she said, all your power and influence, and you still couldn't make them vote for who you wanted to. Yeah. So just as much as, yes, the internet is an important and powerful thing in that, it has its limitations. Yeah. And so I'm wary and I'm interested to see if the Conservatives can recognize that as well and how they would deal with that.
Jen, can I just connect three separate thoughts here and then put them to you if you don't mind? One is this contrast between, you know, Elizabeth May's goodbye to Trudeau tribute, which she had the leader of the Green Party. She had this lovely tweet that was like, look, we didn't agree on much, but I thank him for his service. And then contrast that to Pierre Poilievre's video, which is like, look, a dark history in our, you know, a dark period in our history has ended. That was sort of some of the words that he used in his video. I want to connect that to the thing that you said about, you know, Trudeau goes on Colbert and here's Pierre Poilievre sort of putting directly videos out on YouTube. Then the third thing is, of course, the Jordan Peterson interview, because Pierre Poilievre went on Jordan Peterson's show just a few days before Trudeau's announcement. And that video is sitting at like 2.8 million views on YouTube. What do you think is effective about Pierre Poilievre's approach right now? What do you think it is that's connecting and working?
Well, with the caveat that I think that his approach is also going to start to feel pretty dated. You know, like he's also adopted a kind of political aesthetic that is going to run its course. I just don't know exactly when. So with that caveat put up front, look, he's almost a perfect foil for Justin Trudeau. He's almost crafted in a lab to perfectly mirror both Trudeau's strengths and weaknesses as a politician. Like, bluntly, Pierre Poilievre isn't a super charismatic or likable guy, but what he is authentic. You believe what he says and you believe he means what he says, and that makes him feel very real to people. And that comes in like a breath of fresh air after 10 years of micromanaged communications approaches. The other thing that I would say is, you know, even when Pierre and his party's videos and social media reels feel cringy, and they very often do feel cringy, even to me, they feel cringy but sincere, right? Like, you believe that, yeah, okay, so the music that he overlays on one of his videos, that weird wacko video he did, that stuff was super weird. Yeah. But you can tell it was coming from the heart. It's weirdness,
he
right?
meant it, yeah.
He meant it. He super meant it. Now that's that too is going to get stale, but right now it's the lack of over professionalization. It's the lack of mediation. It's the willingness to just say, look, this is what I think, that I think is very, very refreshing to people right now, particularly after the last couple of years. Not only what's happened in politics, but I think also what's happened in the culture at large.
I got maybe like a minute left here. Justin, what's your take on Poilievre's maybe posture as an influencer, you think?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I'll try to make this as quick as possible. But the prime minister, when he first ran for office, Trudeau, basically said, I want to use the internet as a two-way street. I want to connect with you, and I want you to connect with me, right? And that was a horrible lie, right? Like, there was never actually any two-way conversations happening. It was a one-way conversation, and it was boiled down to the point of absurdity. He talked to us like we were small children, right? And that continued until the day he resigned. What is Pierre Poilievre's greatest asset? Why does he sound authentic? Because he speaks bluntly and clearly, and he sits down for, you know, hour and a half long interviews in a way that let people sit and stew with the things he's saying. I think that eventually will fall apart because he's choosing to do it in a toxic information environment full of conspiracy theories and recriminations and demands that people sort of lose their minds. I don't know what after this looks like, but I just hope to God, to disagree with Riley a bit, I hope our politicians do log off. Go touch grass. Stop spending your days on TikTok, YouTube, Twitter, 4chan, whatever, and just go try and talk to regular people again. get offline.
Okay, I actually have more stuff to talk to you guys about, so I'm going to hold on to you for a moment. We'll keep that conversation going on the podcast, but in the meantime, I'm going to say goodbye to our radio audience. Justin Ling is a freelance reporter. He was in Montreal. Riley Yesno is an Anishinaabe writer and researcher, originally from Thunder Bay, now here in Toronto. Jen Gerson started The Line, a Substack and podcast out of Calgary. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. Find the rest of this conversation on the podcast, but otherwise on the radio, we will see you tomorrow.